So hi everyone, I am Matt Reed. My background has been predominantly in high-level senior management roles. I've had a career that spanned over 22 years now in that kind of in that sort of type of role at least. I've worked in a lot of different industry sectors in that time, everything from financial services through to the legal sector. I did a stint in radio sales and advertising for Vibe FM back in the day. I worked for an educational charity for 6 years, heading up a team of marketeers, which was very interesting. Traded stocks and shares for 2 years. I'm qualified at the highest level in something known as neuro-linguistic programming. So I'm a Master NLPer. So it's one of those things that either you've heard of or you haven't. If you've ever seen Darren Brown or Paul McKenna, people like that, they use a lot of NLP techniques up on stage. I predominantly use NLP for coaching individuals. So there's 2 tiers really. I do a lot of business, professional coaching with people, but I also do private coaching and development as well. So I'm a fully qualified coach, counselor, and hypnotherapist as well. So I do a lot of private client work with individuals on that front. So a lot of the tools and the techniques that I'm going to kind of cram into the next 45 minutes are tools and techniques that I'm advising clients, both personal and professional, all the time. So hopefully they will help you get through the Christmas period, and you can pick and choose which might suit you. Not going to be doing any hypnotherapy today though, so there'll be no swinging of gold watches or looking into the eyes sort of stuff. And none of you will leave today clucking like a Christmas turkey. Well, they don't cluck, do they? They gobble. So maybe none of you will just be gobbling. No, I'm just going to stop there. Right. Okay, moving on swiftly. So here we go. This is all about stress, resilience, and well-being. One of my favorite little sayings or quotes here: a diamond is just a piece of charcoal that handles stress exceptionally well. So what does that tell us? Well, we all really are diamonds, really. But it's difficult. There's a lot of statistics or interesting statistics off the back of stress and well-being and so on. And the definitions as well, because a lot of people say, well, what's the difference between resilience and well-being? You use these words interchangeably. Looking them up, resilience really is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. How resilient are you? And I quite like the next one as well, the ability of a substance or an object to spring back into shape. And that's that whole kind of bounce ability or bounce back ability, as some people would call it as well. Well-being, on the other hand, is really our state of mind. And that's where we will talk about mindfulness today. So it's being in a state where we feel happy and content and comfortable and so on. And it can be really difficult with everything that's been going on in the world over the last 18 months, 2 years, and the extra stresses that's all brought about. Then people are more stressed than ever, quite frankly. Stress in itself, here we go. There's a couple of kind of things to note to kick us off with. It's basically the reaction that people have when we feel excessive pressure. But that can manifest itself in a lot of different ways, really. And it's really, if you like, when our pressure exceeds our perceived ability to cope. And that's quite an interesting way of looking at it as well. Often it's down to perception. So in other words, according to a lot of researchers and professors, we do have the ability to cope. It's just that sometimes we just don't have the tools and the mechanisms and the know-how of how to do that. So our perceived ability to cope is often a lot lower than actually our actual ability to cope with these situations. So a lot of the tools and the techniques that we're about to look at are really designed around giving you the opportunity or the ability to be able to deal with pressures and stress a lot better. Why do we bother with all of this? Why are you even here attending this seminar? Is because there are a lot of statistics to say that the damage that it can cause when we are stressed. The obvious ones: it leads to ill health, it can lead to sickness, absence in work as well. Our performance can go down, not just in the workplace, home area of our life, productivity. and we start getting disengagement, motivation. It has an ongoing effect. There were 488,000 cases of stress-related illnesses in between 2015 and 2016. I don't know if that seems a staggering amount or not. This is in the UK. What do you think is the recorded figure for last year? Does anyone want to give me an idea of what you think a more up-to-date statistic would be?
About double.
About double. Michelle's also nodding her head as well. About double. Interesting, isn't it? Yeah. 828,000. May surprise you, may not. Doubled. That equates to 17.9 million working days lost in the UK. That is staggering, isn't it? Really? Okay. Statistically, that's a roundabout, or costing the UK economy around about £14 billion a year. So £554 per employee. It's costing the actual demand on the UK economy alone is staggering, quite frankly. So it is a big deal, is what we're saying. Stress accounts for 37% of all work-related ill health and 45% of working days lost. That was a 2007 statistic. But basically, there's a lot of top reasons, and they're changing all the time. But a lot of the time, it's actually in the workplace. It will be down to too much responsibility, not enough time. We already had that a minute ago when we were talking about in time management session that I ran last week. It came up an awful lot about, we just don't have time to save time. And that's because the pressures and demands on us are getting greater all the time. So we have to try and do something about that, really. If we can reverse it, or at least try and help ourselves, then clearly we want to get to a point when we can be more healthy and satisfied and be better performing. But those statistics really don't lie. So that's the situation there. Okay. So you've probably heard of the fight or flight response. Yeah. It's an interesting, it's for those of you that don't really know the kind of origins of this. I mean, this is going back to sort of caveman times, really, where we're designed to be able to deal with situations whereby we need a sudden burst of adrenaline and an energy rush in those situations. And back in the day, it was a protection mechanism. If we were confronted with a saber-toothed tiger, it's that whole element of like, I need that adrenaline rushing through me so that I can either run away from it, or I can fight it, or I can do something. There is also the freeze response that sometimes people have as well. Nowadays, we're unlikely to be confronted by a saber-toothed tiger, but we are confronted with lots of other challenges and issues as well. The thing with the flight and fight response is that it can be triggered by all sorts of different things. And sometimes it can be triggered when people are having anxieties and panic attacks and things like that. It's often the case because the reason why we're shaking and the reason why we have the physiological symptoms coming out is because that adrenaline is running through us, yet it's got nowhere to go. So it has to come out and manifest itself somehow along the lines. And I was doing some research a couple of years ago and came across an article which I thought was actually quite interesting as well. They were talking about tear ducts and the reason why should we cry. So in terms of an evolutionary thing, why do we now cry? You can understand, I guess, and we're talking about physical crying, tears. You can understand why our eyes might water if there's something in them, but why is it that we actually physically cry when we're feeling emotional, for example, particularly into adulthood? What purpose does it serve us? And they were looking at the breakdown of tears of, say, happiness over tears of when we are anxious, stressed.
You're right, Jeannie.
Sorry?
Sorry, I should have been on mute.
I thought you were asking the question. They were looking under a microscope of the molecular structure of those tears, and they found that the tears, when we're crying just through being upset, have a different molecular structure to them than when we are crying when we're happy, or we're just crying out of being delighted or something like that. And therefore, what we're identifying is that it's a hormone release. So the reason why we often cry is because the body, again, it's a way of releasing the hormones and the chemicals that are flooding through our body that the body doesn't want, quite frankly. And so it's surplus to requirement. And I thought that was quite interesting as well. So sometimes that's why we might feel better after having a good cry, and you get to the point where you're like, oh, it's done. And then all of a sudden we start feeling better. It's probably because all the negative chemicals in our body are being flushed out. So it's quite interesting, really. So there's always a reason for us to be in different states. And a little bit later, I'll talk to you about the importance of understanding that emotions are an important thing, whether or not it's a good emotion or a bad emotion or whatever, however you see it. Emotions are a coping mechanism in themselves. And so it's important to be able to be emotive. So typically speaking, the stress response, therefore, is usually there is some form of trigger, whatever it might be, and often it can be a subconscious trigger that occurs. It's something that we're not even consciously aware of, that causes us to go into fight or flight and causes the stress relief. And therefore we react. And we often react emotionally as a result. And what we want to be able to do is learn to be able to respond, because there is a difference between a reaction and a response. Clearly, a reaction tends to be more emotive, emotionally driven. A reaction, but a response is clearly something that's more logical. We've had time to think about how we want to respond to something. And that's where mindfulness comes in. So giving a mindfulness response is different to just reacting from an emotional point of view as well. Now, some of you may have come across this before. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, been going around since 1943, and we still bang on about it as trainers even to this day. Maslow identified that we have these innate human needs, and when we go through different levels, and we don't typically look to service or provide ourselves with the next level up until the base level has been met. So typically speaking, we've got these emotional and psychological needs. The first, in terms of physiological needs, are going to be food, water, warmth, and rest. So in other words, Maslow is saying, look, we don't start to look for, we've got a new person joining us. We don't start to look for things like safety needs, security, and so on, or love or friendship, until we've definitely got, food and we're warm and we can rest and we've got a place to sleep and so on, which does make sense. And once those basic needs are being met, then we start to look for the next level up. So that's where we look for basically safety and security in whatever guise or form that takes. If we then meet those needs and we feel satisfied and happy with that, that's when we start looking at relationships, friendships, love. We want that more emotive, psychological need at that level. And then we look for esteem, so self-esteem. And then the very top level of the pyramid is self-actualization. And that's where we really look to try and fulfill our full potential, okay, which is great. But in order to get there, in order to be at the very peak of where we want to be, all of the other baselines have to be covered. And so what it basically tells you is, at any point in your life, you really should be sort of doing a little bit of an evaluation, a bit of a self-check. Because if you are being stressed or feeling stressed, or you're not in a good place, then it's a case of looking through this and saying, well, what level of needs are not currently being met? Now, hopefully, you'll never get to a point whereby your own sort of physiological needs are not being met. In other words, you're not out on the street somewhere. But it could well be that when you do a bit of a self-evaluation check, that perhaps there's a problem or an issue with a certain relationship, or maybe a friendship or something like that, and therefore that's causing you the stress. So the other needs are being met, but that's causing you the problem. So it's identifying where, I guess, the stresses are really coming from. We always have choice in life. A lot of the time we believe that perhaps things are outside of our control, and I'm going to take you through a technique that you can use to evaluate where that control really lies within your life, and we'll come on to that shortly. But I just wanted to draw attention to this in as much as sometimes what we don't do, we say we don't find time to save time. What we don't do is take a stock check and actually evaluate, where is this stress really coming from? What's good in my life and what is working for me and what can provide me with the happiness, and equally, where do I think it's not coming from at the moment? And then working on those areas to improve it. Sounds nice and simple, doesn't it? When we're talking about it here, often putting it into practice, it can be a different beast altogether. So focusing on those things is important. We also have external stresses as well. Okay, so that could be personal stresses, that could be our own illness, that could be conflict with someone else. It can be to do with family. Look, Christmas time is approaching. It's a classic time where families are getting together. Some will really enjoy it. Others are being stuck with in-laws that they'd really rather not be with, and other people and certain friendship groups and so on that perhaps are going to cause conflict and so on. So it's not always a fun time of year for everyone. Work environment. I was speaking to someone yesterday who's essentially going to be working all over Christmas, not being able to spend a lot of time with their friends and family. That in itself is causing them already some anxiety and stresses as well. So making sure that the work environment, that demands on you are being managed are very important. And it can be environmental stresses as well that we typically have as well. A lot of people are suffering at the moment with social anxieties, particularly after having been in lockdown for so long. And a lot of people are now, they want to go out and they want to mix, but at the same time, you know, we've got the COVID rates going up. People are getting nervous again. We're looking at countries that are locking down. It's stressful. People don't really know what they should or shouldn't be doing. It's all causing stress all the time. And things are changing all the while as well, aren't they, with the government at the moment. So, you know, we've got to just recognize there are certain things that we have control over. There are certain things that we have to just accept. And acceptance is a big part of managing your stress levels at times. It's like we can't control the uncontrollable. And there are times where we do have to just accept this is what's going on in the world right now, and this is where we're at. And we have to focus on living more in the moment and not worrying too much, you know, ahead of the game and ahead of looking at future projecting, because there's a lot of things that ultimately we can't plan for and we can't control either. If you're interested in this sort of stuff, a book that I do recommend, you may have heard of it, read it, some of you, is The Chimp Paradox. It's a really, really good book. It's a mind management book, which can be, it's incredibly interesting to help you learn how to manage your inner chimp. Has anyone come across this before? Yeah, so Michelle has. I can't see the rest of you anyway, so I'm just assuming that some of you might be nodding or shaking your head. Yeah, so the chimp paradox is very much about the fact that we have what's known as our inner chimp, and it's the emotively driven part, the Neanderthal part of the brain, that is usually somewhere between 3 and 5 times stronger than the frontal cortex, the actual logical part of the brain. And which is why when we start to get into emotional state, the frontal cortex, the logical, rational part of the brain, often struggles to be able to keep the inner chimp in its box, essentially. And the limbic part, the inner chimp, wants to burst out and cause all sorts of chaos and havoc and be really sort of out there and driving us and making, where we end up making decisions or saying things that are really emotively charged instead. And it's the equivalent, you know, Christmas is coming up, people will probably doing a little bit more drinking and things like that. Well, as soon as you start drinking alcohol, it starts to numb the effects of the frontal cortex as well. So the logical part, rational part of the brain starts getting affected a lot quicker by, say, alcohol. All that then does is it's giving a rite of passage to your inner chimp to then sort of like go, brilliant, right, I'm going to sort of cause a little bit of chaos here. To the extremes, it's the equivalent of, and I'm sure all of you are very different in terms of, you know, how you manage alcohol and how you're affected by it. But it's the equivalent, I guess, of someone drinking, you know, a few glasses of wine, however many beers, dancing up on a table at some point, doing things that the Christmas party that perhaps ordinarily they probably wouldn't have done in the office under the influence of alcohol. It's purely because your inner chimp is having a party and it's going, hey, fun times, you know, It's the next morning when you wake up with a severe hangover and your frontal cortex is then switching back on, and it's going, and that's where you start going, oh God, did I really do that last night? Oh no. You're in a chimp, it's having a nice little nap. He's kind of worn out after, or she is worn out after all the events of the party. Your frontal cortex is going, oh God, now how do I overcome this and get around this? And what have I got to do? And it's damage limitation. And it starts then thinking about all the things that you did, or trying to remember them as well. So just understand that part of the brain is constantly fighting against any rational part of the brain. Okay. And that's where the stresses come from. It's that part where the stress is going to occur, or anger or frustration or emotions. People that have suffered forms of brain damage as well often find that that's why their personalities change. Often you'll see personality changes where the person becomes a lot more aggressive or angry or frustrated in general. And that's usually, again, because the limbic part is now being able to, it's not under control. Because the part of the frontal cortex, that bit of it is likely to have been damaged somewhere along the lines, and that's where you get personality changes as well. So it is a good book. I don't get any commissions by this at all, so it's not a case of click this link and I get a kickback or anything. I'm just recommending it to you. All right. So what we want to do is look at mindfulness to give a skillful response, not a reaction. There's a great saying, your body is present, but is your mind? All right. And this is just picking up the fact that some people do a lot of living in the past, oh, if only this, if only that, I shouldn't have done this. Living in regret doesn't really achieve anything. We can learn from mistakes, we can learn from decisions, we can learn from actions. Some are good, some might not be so good. But fundamentally, it's like we don't have a time machine, as far as I know anyway. And we can't travel back in time. So you can't change the past, you can only learn from it. So it's first and foremost, we have to center our mind in the present moment. It's the only place that we can actually control and influence what's going on around us. The alternative is that people then spend a lot of time future projecting and they live in the future, and it's constant worry. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if the next thing happens? And equally, there are too many manifestations and variations of what could and couldn't happen anyway. So it's almost like wasted energy. We're stressing ourselves out about things that haven't happened or might never happen, or we're stressing ourselves out about things that we've done in the past that we can't change. Your energy, your efforts need to lie in the present moment. So centralizing that mindfulness again, and just saying at times, and it's just a question you have to ask yourself, my body is in the present right now, but where is my mind? Am I doing a lot of past thinking, or am I doing a lot of future projecting right now? And you can do it in any moment. Anytime you're feeling stressed or anxious or concerned about something, question yourself. What is it I'm stressing over? Am I worrying about things that haven't even happened yet and might not happen? Am I worrying about things that I've done in the past? Both is futile. What can I focus on in the here and the now, in this moment in time, that is going to lead me to getting better results? Because that's ultimately what we want to be looking for, isn't it? Focus on the here and the now. It's the only thing that you have control of. I can make a decision here and now that will affect later on today, tomorrow, but I can't really sort of plan that far ahead and make all these decisions because I don't know necessarily what's going to be happening next anyway. So ground yourself is what I'm saying. Okay, live more in the present moment, and that will help you an awful lot. Now, in order to do that, at times, there's a great technique that you can use called spheres of influence or circles of control. It comes under different names. So the idea of this concept is that you grab yourself a pen and paper, you draw these circles out as you're seeing on screen. And what we will do is we will send the slide deck out to you as well. So you will have a copy of these slides sent to you. And what we want to focus on here is, first and foremost, writing down in the outside circle the things that we're currently worried about, we have concerns over. And that could be anything. You can be very general and broad about this in life, or you could relate it more specifically to either a situation at work. It could be a situation in the home area of your life. It can be specific or it can be broad. If it's broad, you're going to have a lot of stuff in there. If it's more specific, you'll have less things. Okay, and you can do multiple versions of this as well for different areas of your life. So in the outside circle, you're writing down anything and all things that you just have a concern over. The next thing you then do is you take whichever those things are that you believe you have an element of influence over. So it could be that you could go and talk to someone about it. You can influence a boss in order to be able to, I don't know, help you manage your time more effectively at work. It depends on really what the concern and the issue is that you're carrying forward. But you take that forward and you write that down in the influencing circle, if you like. So all of the things that you think you've got an element of influence, you might not have total control over it, but you can do something with it. Because what that will do is help you then focus again on the things that you need to pay attention to. What you're left with is the inner circle, and that's where the things that you have direct control over go. So it's where I can control this, I can make a decision, I can choose what I do with this. You have control over that particular concern and worry. What you do notice probably is that that circle of control is a lot smaller than the circle of all the worries, isn't it? And that's generally telling you something, that in actual facts, in reality, the things that we actually have control over is a lot less than typically all the things that we worry about. But where should your time be spent? Well, clearly, not all your effort and energies, we don't want to be wasting in the outside circle of all the things that we can't control and we have no influence over anyway. So first and foremost, what we need to do is then focus on the concerns and the worries that we have, by our own admission, we have got control over and we have got influence over. And that's where you can start then focusing on a plan of action and deciding what you're going to do next. The rest of it, all the other things, yeah, you might be worried and concerned about, but you can't do anything about it anyway. And that's where sometimes we just have to accept the situation as it is. It might be difficult and challenging, but we may just have to accept it for what it is. But by externalizing it and writing it all down, it gives you the opportunity to then get that out of your head. Trying to do that internally is a really difficult and challenging thing to do. So try and externalize it and put it down on paper. And that's why journalizing and diarizing as well is often a really good thing to do, because once again, it's a way of giving your brain a rest. Okay. All good so far? Good. Right, so spheres of influence. Belief cycles. Here's another thing to pick up on as well. Our beliefs cause us, unfortunately, to feel and think in certain different ways, and our feelings and thoughts then cause behaviors. Our behaviors then get us results, and our results basically reinforce our initial beliefs in the first place. So it's sometimes a case of having to change our beliefs and know and understand where our beliefs are coming from. So I give you, it could be the equivalent of someone who has to do public speaking and they're going, I hate public speaking, I always get nervous, I always get anxious, I get panicky, I never do a good job of it. So that belief in itself starts to create those feelings anyway. The stress response comes on, the adrenaline starts pumping through because it's getting you ready to fight and flight the situation. So we start feeling anxious and we start feeling nervous and worried. And then that causes us to have certain thoughts. Oh, I bet it doesn't go very well. People won't like me. I'm going to feel rejected, etc., etc. So we come out to do our presentation and we start behaving nervous. We stumble over our words. All of those things start coming out the way that we believed it would happen. That gets us the result that we thought was going to happen anyway. And then it just reaffirms the initial belief. So it's a self-perpetual thing. It's always going to happen. It's also the equivalent of when we believe we're going to behave in a certain way, or for those of you, and I've been just as guilty of this in the past, where I spill something on my shirt, I'm running late, something else happens, I tread on some Lego, I stab my toe, it's all going a bit wrong. I get in the car and I start driving down the road and I know I'm late for work anyway. And then the next thing happens is I get stuck behind someone driving really slowly. And I think, here we go. Do you know what? It's going to be one of those days. Have you ever said that to yourself? You just basically just say to yourself, even internally, I bet it's going to be one of those days. And sure enough, I get to a set of red traffic lights, and there they are. I knew it, and I bet I get every single set of red traffic lights from here on into work. And do you know what? Guess what happens? You're at the next red set of lights, and the next. You're even thinking someone is deliberately pressing a button to turn them red as you're all coming up to them. You get into work, other things happen. It kind of reinforces the belief system. Oh God, it's just one of those days. Everything's going wrong. And do you know what we do? We get home at the end of the day, and it's almost like we pat ourselves on the back. It's like, I told you I was going to have a bad day, and I did have a bad day. And it's like, well done, you. It's just like, guess what happened there? Yeah, self-fulfilling again. The interesting thing with that is that perhaps the day before, when you were driving to work and your belief system was very much, oh, today's going to be a good day. The sun is shining. I'm in a happy place. I'm listening to some music in the car. And you're feeling okay, you were perhaps sat at a load of red traffic lights. But because they're not on your radar, because you are not looking out for anything to validate your belief system, all you're looking for is good things to validate your happy mood. We end up behaving in a more positive way. It gets positive reactions from others at work. We end up having a much better day. So sometimes what we have to recognize is if we're having a bad day, what's making it bad? Is it really other people and other things and events around us? Or is it us? Are we allowing ourselves to be affected by it? And a lot of people don't like it when I say the fact that no one can really make you feel a certain way. They might be able to influence your feelings to a degree, but no one really makes you feel a certain way. It's a case of how we allow ourselves to be feeling after someone behaves a certain way. It's a very different way of looking at it. And so we have to take more responsibility for our emotions and our feelings at times, because we're the only people that have control over that. If we go about believing that someone can make me feel miserable, someone can make me feel unhappy, a certain event that happens externally to me can make me feel unhappy, we're putting a lot of faith in external things being right for us in order to see whether or not we're going to have a good day or a bad day. And I don't personally really want to be living my life like that, in as much as, do you know what, it's just entirely up to the gods as to whether or not things go well for me today or not, or if I end up feeling in a good place or a bad place. We're putting all of our faith in other people being nice to us, or events just playing out in a really lovely way. And we can't do that in life because it's not always going to be that way. So we have to take responsibility for our own emotions and feelings, and understand that a lot of the time when things are not going our way, the way that we're being affected by it is because we're allowing ourselves to be affected by it. First and foremost, we have choices, we have decisions. We can always take control over the moment that we're living in. It's not always easy, but there's no point in just going, do you know what, stuff keeps happening to me, things keep going wrong, because I have to change that perception. So understanding, first and foremost, it's your belief system that is causing you to feel and think certain ways and bringing on anxieties is important. And then we have to understand, okay, where is that belief coming from? Usually it's past memories, experiences, events, things that have happened in the past that influence that belief system, okay? But there are things that we can do about it. Talk to people, speak to people about those issues and problems as well. Get it out in the open. That can help a lot. So we have these different biases at times. We have what's known as thinking biases. These are classic ones where, oh, I bet they just think that I'm stupid, boring, unattractive, whatever. That can cause stress. I mean, we don't know it. We're mind reading. We're basically just going, I bet they think this way. Yeah, but you've got no guarantees that they do. Crystal ball gazing. Oh, I bet I'm not going to enjoy this. Well, what do you think is going to happen then if you're already telling yourself you're not going to enjoy it? Overestimating the negative. I work with a lot of clients that do this. People that catastrophize. Oh, this is going to be a total disaster. A total disaster. It's really funny when you challenge someone on that. A total disaster. I reckon if the world completely collapsed on itself, exploded into a gazillion pieces, and we were all wiped out, That to me would be a total disaster. The fact that you're worried about a presentation going wrong and you think it's going to be a total disaster, let's put it into some sort of context here. And that's what sometimes I'm trying to do with people, is get a perspective on things. Not always easy again. People that say, oh, this always happens to me, everything always goes wrong, those kind of words, it's generalizing. I'm sure if you really picked it apart, not everything goes wrong. Okay. Eternalizing, I'll never manage this, I'll always feel this way. If you keep telling yourself that, you probably will. So therefore, we have to, again, change our thinking biases. Expecting perfection, from people, over expecting, that's a difficult one from other people. We have expectations of people in the world to behave a certain way or act a certain way. The problem with the expectations is that if we've got no control over that other person anyway, and they don't live up to our expectations, and we're getting upset about that, where does the problem really lie? We can't constantly put expectations on other people to be a certain way or act a certain way. Again, we really only have control over ourselves. I wasn't able to do that. I'm just not good enough. When things go wrong, it's my fault. These are all these thinking biases that can really get in the way. So we have to work on changing those thinking biases instead. Okay. So there was a guy, Professor Stephen Palmer of the Centre for Stress Management in London. Wow, I bet that's a good place to work, isn't it? The Centre for Stress Management. I wonder what it's like inside. I wonder if they've just like got loads of stress balls and kind of just nice soft carpets that you can scrunch your toes in and stuff like that. He came up with what's called the sort of 7 areas, if you like, that we typically get pressure responses from. Okay, so we have different responses. People will respond in different ways to stress and pressure. So some people, it focuses more on the way that they act or behave in the moment. We then have emotional, or being affected in an emotive way, so how we feel. We've also got sensory, so it's the physical sensations we have. It could be shaking, it could be sweating, it could be anything like that. It can be imagery, so people start conjuring up images in their head when under stress, future projecting, that kind of thing. And cognitive beliefs as well. So that's the beliefs again. We start to change our mindset. We start to have certain perceptions on things that perhaps are the wrong perceptions. We're looking at things in the wrong way as well. Interpersonal, then it affects how we relate to other people based upon our thinking biases as well. And then we've also got diet, multiple drinks, there you go, diet, drink, and drugs. Okay, and that is also where we have to focus on those areas of how we are generally looking after our own overall health and well-being as well. So I'm going to take you through a couple of things just to consider and things that you can do based on the fact that it's a short seminar, just trying to get in as much as I can for you today. Just so that you do know, though, if you're interested in this kind of thing, we do run a resilience and well-being one-day course, and we do get a lot of people booking onto it. It basically takes these concepts, but we really do go into a lot more depth and detail about how to apply them. And there's a lot of other techniques that I haven't got time to show you today as well that we cover on the course. So if it is something that you think you might be interested in, and I'm trying not to use this as upselling or anything like that, I'm just making you aware that we do run the resilience and well-being full course, which you might be interested in as well. Here we go. So behavioural techniques, just a couple of pointers really, and we'll get through this pretty quick. The body needs a minimum of 20 minutes to wind down and allow various stress hormones to be reabsorbed, a minimum of 20 minutes. Often it takes people a lot longer after we've been in a stressful situation. What can we do? If you're the sort of person that tends to have to be moving around when you're stressed, I've got to be doing something, I've got to be doing something, then you don't necessarily have to try and slow yourself down. Some advisors would say, hey, chill out, take it easy. But if you're then laying on your sofa and you're going, oh, this is no good because I really need to be getting on with something, then some advice would be just be moving around in different ways. So go for a run. go down the gym, maybe exercise, burn off the excess energy that way, or focus on doing a task or an activity, a bit of DIY, whatever it might be. In other words, don't try and just realign where that current energy is going at that moment. Encourage yourself, though, to take one thing at a time. So the problem is sometimes people just take on too much. They're trying to deal with too many things, and they get themselves in a right muddle as a result of it. Regular breaks from your desk. So those of you that are on my time management seminar last week would have known that I talked about something called the Pomodoro technique. It's basically making sure that you take regular breaks, whether or not you work for 50 minutes and take a 10-minute break every hour. It's really important that you take regular breaks all the way through the day. They don't have to be very long, but just enough to be able to reset the mind and the brain, okay? Acknowledge the good work that you do. So again, on the time management course, I talked about Andresen's anti-to-do list. In other words, you have a to-do list of things that you need to get done, but often we're getting interrupted by other people's demands and needs. Sometimes we just end up doing a load of things that weren't on the original list. If that's the case, create a new list of all the things that you have accomplished, and then make sure you review it at the end of the week, and be proud of it. Because sometimes people get to the end of the week and they're stressing because they're looking at their to-do list going, oh, I haven't been able to, manage to get half of this done, but I know I've been busy. So make sure that you make a log and a list of the things that you have been busy on. And that in itself will acknowledge where your time has been spent as well. And talk about your feelings. Not always easy for people to do this, but if you are stressed, you are worried or anxious, be open about it to people, to colleagues, to the boss, whatever. Make sure people know. If people don't know, they can't help you. Okay. And sometimes just ask yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen anyway, if this job doesn't get done or I don't achieve X, Y, and Z? Okay. So that's going to be important for you to pick up on there. All right. Good. Again, when people are getting flustered, disorganized, under very constant pressure, you can attend one of our time management courses. I feel like I'm doing a lot of cross-selling now. But map your use of time, see where your time is going, break your task down into subtasks. That can always be very useful as well. There's a phrase, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Okay, so it's the same concept there. Get unpleasant tasks out of the way first. There's a classic saying again, eat the frog. In other words, if the first thing that you had to do every single day was to eat a frog, okay, then make sure you get it done first and foremost. Because if it's the worst thing that you're going to do all day long, then you might as well get it out of the way anyway. Check emails perhaps at the end of the day, make phone calls in batches, batch your use of time in terms of checking emails as well, and protect your own time. You may have to push back and be a bit more assertive, okay? Delegate where you can. So just a couple of things to consider. It might be almost a tick list. It's saying, okay, what can I do? What can't I do as a result of today's session? Create stability zones for you as well, okay? It could be places, if you like to go for a walk along a beach, if you live near the coast. It could be a certain room that you like to chill out in at home, a conservatory or what have you. It could be certain things that you like to have around you. It could be pictures on your phone. It could be anything really, a security blanket if you still carry one around with you. Activities, again, hobbies that you can lose yourself into. Know what works for you, but make sure that you understand what those things are, okay? And maybe it's just hanging with people, like-minded people as well. There's always things that we can do. So find stability zones for yourself. Okay. Emotionally, as I said to you before, technically speaking, no person or event can make you feel any particular emotion. And emotions are neither good or bad anyway. Okay. They are there for a survival purpose. So therefore, we have to sometimes just accept it and let the emotions out. Okay. So practice counting to 10. If you're the sort of person that tends to have kind of outbursts, you react rather than respond, perhaps just count in your head before you go and do a response to something. 5 slow, deep breaths and lengthen the out breath. There is a technique called the 7-11 technique. You breathe in for the count of 7, you breathe out for the count of 11. All right. Or thereabouts. People's lung capacities are slightly different anyway. But the out breath should be longer than the in breath. Okay, you breathe in through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Leave the situation, go back to it afterwards, give time for you to settle down and respond, or use the OMG framework. Orientate yourself, you look around you. This is particularly what people do when they're having panic and anxiety attacks as well. It's important to ground yourself. So you observe things that are external to you. Look around. What do you see? What do you notice about you? Moving about can help as well. It loosens the muscles. Okay, so if you're sitting there, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling intense, have a walk. Go and use up some of that energy instead. And sense your body, sense where the tightness and the tensions are as well. It's being more self-aware of where all of that's coming from, and that can help you an awful lot as well. Okay. So there are some additional slides in the slide deck about 7-11 breathing, mindfulness as well, and sort of meditation. So I've got some key slides around those kind of things. Sometimes imagery, so using particular kind of imagery. So for example, as I said, I'm not going to go through all of these slides because you'll be sent them out anyway. So there's the sort of 7-11 relaxation, meditation, progressive relaxation for feet and muscle groups. It tells you what to do on there. So I'm not gonna read through all of that with you as well. Basically focusing your mind on thoughts. Imagine, I don't know if anyone remembers the old Frogger game back in the day. You had to get the frog to cross the road. What I often do, and I find this actually works really well at night in bed when I'm kind of laying there, if I've got loads of thoughts running through my head and it feels like a busy road, what you imagine, you can either imagine it like a busy road looking down from above, or you could even imagine it like the Frogger game. And bit by bit, what you focus on is clearing the traffic. So the road starts to become emptier and emptier. So you imagine all your thoughts are just like that busy road, all of these cars going across on the road. And what you do is you start to imagine that the road becomes clearer. There's less cars moving along. There's less cars. And in the end, you end up with a clear road. And what you'll find is, as a result of it, your mind will feel clearer as well. It's almost like you've allowed your thoughts to just dissipate. It's no longer that busy junction, that busy road. Okay, so that's really what that kind of is to do with, is just imagery. And imagery techniques can be particularly useful anyway. So we can imagine ourselves in a feared situation, but coping with it. That's particularly for those of you that future project an awful lot. We can use, there's the 10-10 perspective. So I'm really anxious, I'm really nervous about this particular situation right now. So think in terms of future projecting. How will this situation appear in 10 days' time, 10 months from now, and 10 years? Because it gets perspective again. We all know that emotions change, they come and go. And that's the good thing about emotions a lot of the time, is that we know that we won't necessarily be feeling the way we do now in 6 months' time. So sometimes it's getting a perspective on things. Looking at visualizing us in a happy, positive place as well can also help. So they're all imagery techniques that you can use. Talking things through before they become conflict, avoiding blame statements as well, confirming understanding rather than assuming, particularly when it comes to workloads, being aware of the emotional impact that you have on others as well. Okay, and accepting responsibility for what we do rather than putting blame on other people, okay, is also important. And sometimes just being accepting of feedback, because feedback is good. It doesn't have to be taken negatively as well. And then finally, really, as I said, it is Christmas time, so there hopefully you are all going to be partying and enjoying yourself, but just kind of, you know, understand that alcohol is a depressant. And so moderate consumption is absolutely fine. But again, it does depress the central nervous system. And because of that, we can feel unwell. It can cause more stress as a result. Often we do become more stressed as a result of drinking alcohol, and it can bring on stresses anyway. So just kind of, I don't want to be a party pooper here, but you know, I do want you to just be mindful of that. And remember, your inner chimp will escape and start running riot as well. Also smoking. So those of you that smoke, just understand again, 2,000 chemicals, typically are going through our body, which can interfere with many things. So maybe a New Year's resolution might be to either give up or cut down at least. Caffeine, those of you that like your coffee, yeah, I do as well, but average intake of caffeine in the UK is 444 milligrams daily. Okay, even if you were to reduce 2 to 3 even cups of coffee or tea, it can actually reduce the risk of strokes and all sorts of other cardiovascular diseases as well. Try and get some exercise. If you're not into the gym and things like that, and perhaps just go out for a walk over Christmas, you know, wrap up warm and go for a nice winter walk. Get exercise. Just don't sit about, because the more you sit about and become sluggish, the more it makes you sluggish as well. Eat healthy. I mean, there's going to be probably a lot of food going around, particularly in my household as well. But just making sure that, you know, you look after your diet still and so on, because all that happens is people go completely crazy over Christmas and they feel really bad in the new year for it as well. Okay, and get sufficient rest as well. 2 hours less than normal sleep can basically degrade critical judgments, decisions as well that you make by up to 50%. Sleep is incredibly important. We have to get that rest. It's that basic need again, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So make sure that you rest yourself as well in between. Try and have a break over Christmas if you can. So there is a first aid checklist. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these. This is purely for you when the slide deck gets sent out. And there's a lot of key points on there. So if you are feeling at some point stressed or anxious over Christmas, that you want a little bit of resilience, well-being there, then there's a few things. Go through this and check off the list, because there's a lot on there that you can do to help yourself. Okay, there you go. Whew, that was a lot to cram in, wasn't it, in a short session? How was that for people? Just a few pointers. You can revisit it, go over the slides, reacquaint yourself and so on. Does anyone have any specific questions before we wrap up at all? No? Good. Right. Well, everyone, there you go. There's your resilience and well-being session done. We are running another session next Tuesday. If you're interested, it's very much about psychometric profiling and personality types. It's going to be incredibly useful for those of you that want to learn how to deal with others, particularly over Christmas and the Christmas table. Turn frustration to fascination is what we're going to be particularly concentrating on. How to adapt your communication style, how to understand people's behaviors. It's really, really interesting. And we are going to be looking at Santa Claus's profile as well. So understanding the man in the beard, so I should say with the beard, sorry. Ooh, there's no children around. So understanding the guy a lot better as well. So we're going to be using that. So it's going to be a fun event. It'll be the last one we do before Christmas break and everything. So if you can join us on that, that'd be great. So if I see you on that, that would be brilliant. If not, then have a great Christmas and a great New Year. Try and take some of the advice I've tried to share with you today, and enjoy yourselves and look after yourselves. All right. There we go.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks.
Have a good rest of your day.
Cheers, Matt.